Hello again, and today we're going to look at quadratics, multiplying polynomials and quadratics, because that's what you get when you multiply two binomials. Now, as we talked about before when we were talking about multiplying and using the distributive law and the FOIL method, that's what we're going to predominantly talk about today. Now, anytime you have two binomials, x plus 2 times x minus 3. You can use the FOIL method. Now I'm going to stick to the FOIL method because when you go into Algebra 2 or 102 or whatever you call it, you're going to undo the FOIL method, and it's called the reverse FOIL method. And that's why I'm sticking to the FOIL method here. So first, x squared, outer or outside, inside, and last. So first, outside, inside, last. FOIL. And that's going to give us x squared. These two usually, not all the time, but usually combine like terms. Negative 3 plus 2 is negative x minus 6. And this is what we call a quadratic. Now you're going to hear a lot more about quadratics in the Algebra 2 version of the review. You're going to hear a lot more about quadratics in college algebra, Algebra 2, Algebra 3. But this is how you get a quadratic. And then you'll talk about the vertical and horizontal shifts, and you're going to talk about undoing it, finding the x-intercepts, but that's later. Okay, let's try another one. And the form, a quadratic equation is in the form f of x is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c. That is what, write that down as the standard form of a quadratic equation. And you're going to be looking at this, that, and that, which is 1, negative 1, and 6. And you're going to be looking at that later, okay? So let's do another one. 2x squared. Oops, sorry. That's not 2x squared. 2x. I just can't get anything going today. There we go. 2x plus 2 times 3x minus 6. First, 2x times 3x is 6x squared. Outside is negative 12x. Inside is positive 6x. And last is negative 12. And usually, let's go ahead and write that outside, inside, and last. And these two right here usually combine. And you get 6x squared minus 6x minus 12. There's two good examples of the FOIL method. But we'll do two more, and it's very important that you get this down. You know, in past videos I tell you about staples. The FOIL method is a staple. Because if you don't learn the FOIL method and what it gives you, you're not going to be able to continue with the quadratics and factoring quadratics in the next review or the next class or whatever you want to call it. Well, let's try another quadratic. 3x minus 7 times x plus 4. First, 3x times x is 3x squared. Outside, plus 12x. Inside, minus 7x. Last is negative 28. These two usually combine. 3x squared plus 12x minus 7 is 5x minus 28. Two x plus 11 times 4x minus 2. Pause the video and go ahead and work those problems, or work that problem, multiplying using the FOIL method. Okay, let's see how you did. And that's going to be 8x squared negative 4x plus 44x minus 22. And that's going to give us 8x squared. These two is 40x minus 22. Now that's how you use the FOIL method. And you can only use it when you're multiplying two binomials. And you're going to see this a lot in coming classes, especially algebra-based, Algebra 2, Algebra 3, 102, whatever you take. Now, if we can do the FOIL method, then we should be able to reverse it. And that's called factoring. Remember, we talked about factoring before, and we talked about factoring out a common term. Let's review some factoring. 54. If I decide to factor 54, I can factor that into 6 times 9, or I can factor it into 2 times 27, or I can factor it into prime numbers and get with 2 times 3 times 3 times 3. So either way, factoring means expand. Factoring means expand into its multiples. That's what it means. So if I break up x squared, I'm breaking it up into x times x. If I break up x minus 1 squared, I break that up into x minus 1 times x minus 1. So whatever your application, whether it be mathematics or whether it be algebra, factoring means break up one term into its multiples, That's what factoring is. So let's take, for instance, 2x plus 4. Well, I can break that up into 2 times x plus 2. I can factor out a common term and make it out 2 times x plus 2. But what about a quadratic that we just talked about? What about it? How are you going to break up something that looks like this? X squared plus, I'm just going to use something simple, 4x plus 4. I mean, well, how did you get the quadratic? You got the quadratic from using the FOIL method. So you're going to find the factors by using the reverse FOIL method. So you've got to first draw 2 sets of parentheses, because when we started, okay, we'll go over here, and I'm just going to do a FOIL method. This is what we did when we multiplied, and we know that multiplying is the opposite of division, and division is factoring. So the FOIL method, we had 2 sets of parentheses, x plus 2, x minus 3, and then we did this times this, and this times this, and this times this, and this times this. So if we want to make the quadratic look like the FOIL method, we have to draw two sets of parentheses. And we know that the first two is going to be x, because x times x will always give us x squared. Now these will get more difficult in the Algebra 2 section, but right now we're just starting with, we're crawling before we walk, okay? And I know that this 4 has got a multiple of 1 times 4 or 2 times 2. 2 times 2 will always give me 4, and 1 times 4 will always give me 4. So I use multiplication with this one, and I use multiplication with this one. Again, I'm thinking about reversing this. Remember, I'm going to highlight the first and the last. First, x times x. I use multiplication. Last, x times negative 3. X times negative 3. So I used multiplication on both of those. But what did I use to get the middle number? I combined like terms, which means addition or subtraction. So I've got to find a multiple of 4, which means 4 times 1 or 2 times 2, that will add or subtract and give me the middle number, which is a 4. Because the outside and the inside are combined like terms to get the middle term. So 4, if I add 4 or subtract 4, that will give me a positive 5, a 5 or a 3. 4 plus 1 is 5, 4 minus 1 is 3. Negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3. Negative 4 minus negative 1 or minus 1 is negative 5. No matter what you do with 4 and 1, you can multiply it and you get 4. But when you add or subtract it, you're going to get 5 or 3. 2 and 2 will give me a 0 or a 4. We need a 4. So that means I'm going to use 2 and 2. So I'll put a 2 here and a 2 here. This sign and this sign, we get this sign by combining like terms. So combining like terms, right here, combining like terms, the biggest number has to be that sign. The biggest number has to be that sign. So in this case, 2 and 2 are the same number, so I just pick one. And then this means like, because what did we do to get the last term? We multiplied. So like signs are positive. This sign is positive, so this sign has to be positive. So we just factored x squared plus 4x plus 4 into x plus 2 times x plus 2, or x plus 2 quantity squared. Now I would say probably out of all the Algebra 1 material, this is probably going to be the most aggravating for you because you're thinking outside the box. Now when I go over a couple of examples, hopefully you'll start catching on. Because basically what you are doing is you are factoring a quadratic. So let's try another one. Let's try x squared plus 2x and let's go with a negative 3. Now I want you to draw two sets of parentheses. I want you to break the x squared, put x in the front, x in the front. Because for right now, for Algebra 1 review, all of your answers are going to look like this. Okay, we'll get to the other ones later in Algebra 2. But here, we're going to be dealing with just x and x. Now, what are the multiples of 3? Well, there's only 2, 1 times 3. So put a 1 here and a 3 here. There's no other multiples of 3 because 3 is a prime number. Now, what sign is this? positive. So that means the 3 has to be positive. What sign is this? Negative. So that means unlike. So if this is positive, this has got to be negative, and you're done. So let's do another one. X squared. Let's go with plus 5x minus 9. Let's see. I'm trying to think. No. $14. So again, we're going to break up x, x, and 14 is 2 times 7, or 1 times 14. Well, 1 times 14 will give me a 15 or a 13. 2 and 7 will give me a 9 or a what? A 5. We want a 5. So 2 and 7 is our numbers. What sign is this? Plus. So that means a 7 has to be plus. What does this mean? Like or unlike? Unlike. So therefore, if that's positive, this has got to be negative. That's your answer. Now, if you want to check them, check by doing the FOIL method. And I would highly suggest doing that, because then you'll start seeing how you're getting the reverse FOIL method by checking it with the FOIL method. I'll do this one for you. X times x is x squared. Positive 3x minus 1x minus 3. And these two usually combine. X squared plus 2x minus 3. And that should be what you started with. So, you should now check the second one and see if you come out with x squared plus 5x minus 14. So pause the video and check that one. Now let's try. X times x is x squared. Outside is 7x. Inside is negative 2x. Last is negative 14. This combines. X squared, 7x minus, that's 5x, minus 14. And that should be what you started with. Now, there is another way you can do this, and I will show you the first 3 shortcuts. This is what I call the shortcuts. I call them the shortcuts because you got 3 different names, and one of them's called the sum of 2 squares, the difference of 2 squares, and then the difference of 2, let's see, sum squared, different squares, and difference between 2 squares. I think that's what they're called. I just call them shortcuts 1, 2, and 3. There's 2 more, but we'll go over those in another class. Shortcut number 1. A plus B quantity squared is equal to A squared plus 2AB plus B squared. 2. A minus B quantity squared is equal to A squared minus 2AB plus B squared. And 3. A squared minus B squared is equal to A plus B times A minus B. Now, I'd like to go ahead and show you how these work. if you go from this direction, you're multiplying. If you go this direction, you're factoring, which is dividing. Here, if you go this direction, you're multiplying. If you go this direction, you're factoring. Now make sure you know these three shortcuts. I'm going to show you how we use them in just a second, but go ahead and pause the video and write those three down. Now, a while back I told you to have an index card with your perfect squares. Hopefully you wrote an index card with your perfect squares, perfect cubes, perfect fourths, perfect fifths. Hopefully you wrote all those down. You got to know your perfect squares because that's how you test to see if you can do a shortcut instead of having to do the FOIL method or the reverse FOIL method. This is a shortcut for using the FOIL method, depending on which way you go, or factoring. But there's only a few that you can do. How do you check it? Take the square root of the first term. Take the square root of the last term. Multiply it by 2, and if you get the middle term, it is a shortcut. I'll show you an example. X squared plus 4x plus 4. Now it looks like this one right here. Okay, it's got 3 terms. The first is a perfect square, the last is a perfect square, and you got 2 pluses. So take the square root of the first term, take the square root of the last term, and multiply that by 2, and you get 4x, and 4x is the middle term, so this one is a shortcut. How do you use it now? Well, I'm going to show you. You take the problem that you're given, now that we know that this is one that you can use, you take that problem and you put it under the shortcut that you're using. So I'm using a plus b, quantity squared, is equal to a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. So I put my number, x squared plus 4x plus 4. And then I just do this. So a squared is equal to x squared, and b squared is equal to 4. Take the square root of this, take the square root of that. A is equal to x, b is equal to 2, and I take those two and plug into that, and my answer is x plus 2 quantity squared. Now, of course, all this is done in your head. After you do 500 or 600 of these, you start to do it in your head and you don't have to write anything down. That's your goal. Your goal is to learn how to do these in your head, mentally. That's your goal. And there's 5 of them. For right now, we're just doing 3. Now, what did we do here? We took this and we went to here, and that's called factoring. So I factored that x squared plus 4x plus 4 into x plus 2 times x plus 2, and you can take your FOIL method and check it. And you should get that. Okay, so let's try another one. Let's try x squared minus 6x plus 9. Well, let's check it to see if it is a perfect square. Square root of this is x. Square root of this is 3. 2 times 3 times 6x. 6x, yep, it's a perfect square. So we got to put the shortcut under it. X squared plus 6x plus 9. It looks like the second one. A squared minus 2ab plus b squared is equal to a minus b quantity squared. And here is your x squared and there's your b, so we write that down. A squared is equal to x squared. B squared is equal to 9. Take the square root of both. A is equal to x and b is equal to 3. Take those two, plug into this, and we get x minus 3 quantity squared. Now you will see these in your homework, and you will see a lot of them, because whenever you're learning the shortcuts, the 5 shortcuts, this is the first 3, you have to have a lot of problems and a lot of homework for you to be able to do these problems mentally. And it takes a while, kind of like playing a musical instrument. You don't learn how to play a musical instrument overnight. All right, let's try the last one. And we'll go over more of these because you're going to see, when you go through Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, you see a lot of these. So you're going to have plenty of time to learn them. But the more you learn now, the better. So let's go ahead and do one more. And let's do x squared minus 4. Well, I know this one is shortcut number 3 because there's only 2 terms. See? A squared and b squared. And there's no parentheses. So take the square root of this. That's x. Take the square root of that. That's 2. And plug it in the right side. X plus 2 and x minus 2. If I had x squared minus 36, that would be x plus 6, x minus 6. And see, you can already start doing that one in your head because you know the square root of x squared is x, and the x squared of 36 is 6. So that one, number 3, is not a hard one to learn. Now, that is multiplying again by the FOIL method, and then you can use the shortcuts to either go from here to here, which means you are factoring, or you can go the other way and you can multiply. But you'll see more of these.